Welcome, traveler. My name is Korg the Mighty with a nerdy guide to D&D, and today we are joined by Anna B. Meyer. She's a fantasy cartographer specializing in the visualization of fantasy worlds using the latest digital tools and an artistic eye. She's been mapping for in and around 4 decades, starting back in the 80s, with 2 decades of experience mapping the world of Greyhawk. For her work, she's received an Emmy nomination back in 2014 and gotten the chance to work with groups such as the Kobold Press on projects like Midgard and the Southlands. Her maps are used by thousands of gamers around the world, many being distributed under the Creative Commons license. Anna, welcome to the campfire. How are you doing today?
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it is wonderful to have you. We've been very excited to set up this interview and get to talk with you more about your involvement within the fantasy cartography space, your experiences, what you like about it, so on and so forth. So,
Mhm.
really, thank you for coming on. We have a whole list of questions, but we're gonna keep this more casual and more like conversation sort of tone. And for like our first question, I'm gonna pass it over to Lily.
Hiya. So, looking when we've been researching about you, we found out that you've played almost. I believe this might be right. You've played every single edition of D&D.
Yes,
So,
everything since sorry.
no, carry on.
Everything since we got the first Sea Orcs copy of, I think it was the brown box or the white box. We're not really sure. It was one of the earliest versions of D&D. Someone had been in the US and been a exchange student or something, brought over rules. Someone copied it. We had one set of dice, and then we got the red box, the original red box, and we played with that. And then we got AD&D, and so I played every edition since, and a whole bunch of other role-playing games too, like Pathfinder and Cthulhu a little bit, and Traveler, and a whole bunch of others too over the years. But not so much. I've been D&D mostly, and
Yeah. So tell us about how you first encountered D&D.
It was the friends of friends. I was just needed. Someone just needed more players, and I was dragged in. And the I didn't know what it was. I never read Tolkien. I didn't know what fantasy was. I had basic idea what dragons were, but I didn't know about hobbits or elves or any of that stuff. So I started playing before I even knew fantasy. And in the beginning, I did realize, what crap is this? And I didn't get it. I thought it was just dice and people told me what to do, and now you roll this, and I was just confused. And then after a couple of plays, we got another DM. I think it was like the second or third time. This is like 40 years ago, so it's a little bit blurry. But then I was 15 at the time, and we got another guy who ran it, and he understood how to be a DM. And that's when I understood the potential of the game. Like, you can simulate a whole world. You can do anything. Yeah. That's when the chip kind of fell, and I was like, this is a cool idea. And that's when I started to read fantasy. I started to understand what the game was about and the potential of it. And then I was sold from then on, when it was like, this is so cool. You can do anything. It's like could become my world. And in the beginning, I was so fascinated, what do all this cool stuff comes from? And then I started reading Tolkien, and I started to realize, you can imagine whole worlds that don't exist. That had never struck me before. I was so into like science and the real world and stuff. So fantasy worlds, I thought that was for 6-year-olds, not for teenagers and stuff. Then I was ready to go out in the real world, and fantasy was the least on my mind at all. I was never into it at first, but then that changed. And then in '83, when we played a little bit, I got we went to the game store. There was one store in Gothenburg that started selling D&D and other role-playing game stuff, and they had the Greyhawk box set, and it was not wrapped in plastic. So I opened it, and I saw the heraldry and the maps, and I was like, this is where it comes from. This is my world. So I simply bought it in secret and read it, and then when I started running games, Greyhawk became my thing, and I just kept doing it, and I still do it.
Yeah.
So that was how I got into it. Yep.
Yeah, so that's so interesting, because for a lot of people going into D&D, like the whole world building side of thing is something that people find incredibly intimidating. I know I definitely did when I first thought, oh, maybe I might be interested. But like since actually looking into it, like yourself, I just it's opened up a whole new thing for me.
Mhm.
So what is it about D&D in particular that keeps you coming back?
It is the world building. The map cartography is something I think I'm really good at, and then world building. I'm excellence in mapping. I'm a good world builder, and I'm an okay, decent gamer, so to speak, DM. So for me, world building, DMing and actually playing the game is more like an outlet for my world building than the other way around. I spend more time prepping games than running them. And to be honest, I think that is, and I turned over prepping into my career. So in that sense, it's more like sometimes it's like being an athlete. Sometimes you have to compete too. You can't just go around and train and prep for actually, you actually have to go out and do it.
Yeah.
So
That's so
otherwise,
true.
I would sit with my maps and just do it, so to speak. So yeah.
Have you
Yeah,
ever sort of like? Oh, sorry, Lily. What were you gonna say?
No, I was saying you have to share. You just have to share. You've got such a
Mhm.
gift with it. You've got to share it with the world.
Thank you. Yep.
Have you ever encountered like a situation where you have spent a lot of time like prepping something and but you still feel like under prepped because you wanted to sort of put a lot more detail in it, and even though there's already a ton, there was a lot more you wanted to put into it, and so you'll say like, oh, I feel
Yep.
very under prepared, and then other people hear it and they're like, you are putting so much more effort into this.
Yeah, I feel chronically under prepped, and still I'm putting way more time into it than others. But it's probably my approach. But I can also wing it. So I feel that's the weird thing. I feel under prepared until 1 hour into a game session. Then all of a sudden I realize that, oh, I already thought about that. Then it actually works. So that's why I hate to start running a game 1 hour into a session. I love it. So the thing, I should do it more often, but it's well, in this day and age we're all busy with things. Even I'm busy, and it's hard to schedule. And now when you run it online, I should, and I want to restructure. We can get back to that. I want to restructure how I run my games so I can actually facilitate running more games. That's one of the things. So yeah.
Well, whenabouts did you become interested in map making? Like, has that always been an interest with making maps, or is it mainly been maps and stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I always wondered about it, but I realized it's me combining passions. It's like I've always been interested in maps. And a lot of people, they drew pretty pictures of people and fairy tale things when they were 10 years old. I actually drew maps of the area I lived in, and then I took them out and walked around to find things. So, but it was because I had a dad who was a nature photographer and a stepdad later on that did orienteering and stuff. So I seen them use maps to go around finding things and stuff. So maps were fascinating to me as a 5 to 10-year-old. And then I started getting into it. Then I became a soldier, an avid hiker, kayaker, and stuff. So I navigate and a pilot. So navigating and using map was something that became second nature to me. So when I went into gaming, I like most gamers, I wanted to design the coolest monsters, the best rules, the best whatever. And I realized I'm not much of a writer. And English is my secondary language, and growing up in Sweden and moved to California 10 years ago. So I'm kind of, English is an adopted language to me. So that way I realized that I would not be able to compete on a lot of that other side. I'm not a math genius and I'm not a rules nerd. So I realized that maps is where I can actually make a contribution. That's where I think I could be cutting edge, understanding how real world maps. So I combined my love of nature. I'm one of my main hobbies is nature photography. I go out and take landscape pictures and stuff. So I know what the world looks like from the air and from the ground, and I understand. I'm trying to teach myself geology and stuff. So I try to understand how the real world works. So I combine that passion, the understanding and passion for maps and role-playing games, and I try to kind of merge the three passions into something. So if you're a gamer, what kind of maps do you really want to use? And as a DM and as a player. So to visualize game settings, that's became my thing, so to speak.
Yeah. And it can really, like, from what I'm hearing, it can really take a lot of different types of skills to kind of come together and make a map, because I think that some people think that, like, it's primarily a design thing, right? You just, do it until it looks nice, but like you were saying, you can work in skills like geology, nature photography into it's something that can be so easily molded by different skill sets that somebody might not even think could relate at all to the process of map making. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think that in role, that is probably a lot of people that work, and if you want to do cool things in the tabletop role-playing game world, what you should do is that you should take one of your other passions from somewhere, writing poetry, come up with cool traps, puzzles, and whatever, something that you utilized outside of the tabletop role-playing game, and then become a gamer and then use that other passion and combine the two. Meaning now we have fantasy cookbooks and stuff like that. So meaning you're a foodie and you're a gamer. That's a combination you can make. What do people eat and drink and stuff in it? What kind of music do they use in a fantasy world? Meaning there are endless cool possibilities where you can take your talent from somewhere else and apply it to your gaming and make
Yeah, I love
games
that.
better for everybody. Yeah.
That's
And
such
now
good
all
advice.
Now
Yeah.
all I can think about is somebody designing a dungeon puzzle, but it's
Yeah.
all communicated through haikus.
Mhm.
You
Yep.
mentioned
Yep.
poetry.
Yep. Meaning there's so many cool things, and there's a shortage of there's so many people that create stuff in the tabletop role-playing games, but a lot of us, we just imitating each other and refine. But there's a possibility of doing something completely new. Even if there's like million stuff coming out every year, there's still holes to fill, so to speak.
So you said map making came first. So you came a map maker and stuff, and then D&D kind of came in. Like, but why? What do you think is D&D's like affected your map making? Like, what do you think map making has made you better? Like D&D, like planning out the world.
Yet for me, it's become a synthesis in that sense that I try to what it made me want to learn things in the real world. Meaning, I want to learn how planet works and how geology works and how climate works and stuff like that in order to figure out how would that work in a fantasy world where you have demonic incursions and undeath and divine beings that can wipe out things, and how would that affect, meaning we have a climate crisis in the world, how would that be in a fantasy world? If there are too many undeads, would that screw up the world? And things like that. I'm always trying to take inspiration from the real world and then use the fantasy version of it. What happens to the economy if they get the dragon horde that is like 1 trillion gold pieces laying around somewhere? Would there be an enormous inflation and various stuff? So you can always combine real hard facts from the real world and then you can use the weirdest things as a cool inspiration. And so what I try to do is to take maps. Maps can take so many different forms, meaning we have illustrative maps. The example I usually have when I do seminars and stuff at conventions there are informational maps and there are inspirational maps. Informational maps is the map if you want to, when you sit in your car and you put in something in your GPS and the GPS need to tell you go from A to B, then you want as much information as possible, no inspiration. The GPS is not trying to persuade you to go anywhere, it's just trying to tell you the minimal amount of information, easily readable and digestible while you're driving. And then you have the opposite map. Let's you go to a zoo or a theme park or something, and they want to inspire you to take the journey and walk across the hill to go and see the elephants or whatever it is, the savannah enclosure that is 2 miles away. Then they have this kind of cute map that looks silly and funny with cute little animals and ice cream stands and whatnot. And they try to kind of obfuscate the information. They don't try to tell you need to walk 2.5 miles across over to get to the savannah. They just try to tell you all the cool things that are over there in order to have you stay in the zoo and walk around. That's a map that is there to inspire you much more than inform you. And in a fantasy game, the interesting bit is that the real world doesn't exist. So you have to visualize it somehow, or you just have to talk about it. And that means that inspiration, especially on the planning stage, is really important. And then you have, meaning the old school maps, these kind of blue dungeon maps, they were pure information. There were no inspiration whatsoever. And to me, that's a loss, because a game really needs inspirational map, something that if you're planning the game, like, oh, the characters are going from this town over to that town over there, or to that kingdom, where do the orcs ambush, and where would they build a castle to defend the road, etc., and stuff like that. You should be able to deduct that from the map, so to speak. And these are things that I want to have maps that can do that for you.
Going on to our next question. Speaking of inspiration, so what inspires you to do what you do today with like your map making or just stuff in general?
A myriad of things. First of all, my own gaming when I'm playing, and players, and what I read, and blogs, and what a lot of other fantasy and tabletop role-playing game creators. That's half my passion, so to speak. I see all the cool stuff they do and experiences as a gamer. But the other one is real world stuff, meaning I go out and I hike the mountains here in sunny California, and I like to see, oh, this place is awesome. And I sit down sometimes and just sit on a hill and overlooking things, and I say, okay, so let's the journey. The players want to go to that end, so to speak. If I were a baron and I ruled this, where would I set up my castle, and where will I build a road and stuff? Or if I were a dragon, where should I have my lair, so to speak, and where should I perch in order to be able to see as much as possible and not be seen? And then I try to put things in there, and I also try to look at simple things like, where do trees grow, for instance, and where do they don't grow? That's one of the things. If you get detailed enough, that's something that is really hard to implement, so to speak. So I try to look at different parts of the world. So I go into Google Maps and I look at try to see, okay, this area I'm working on right now, what kind of climate does it have? What kind of terrain? And then I try to find a similar place on Earth, and I study what are the colors and what grows there, where does it grow, and so on and so forth. And then comes the tricky bit, because the real world of today is so shaped by humans, meaning we have dammed up every river, we chopped down more than half of the forests in the world, we built agriculture basically everywhere where you can grow something, someone is growing something. So the real world is so modernized and humanized in that sense. We have destroyed it and we cultivated it. So a fantasy world, I see it much more pristine, like the real world was 2,000-3,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. And then you can also do the other way. What would, if there is an abundance of dragons, what would they do? Meaning elephants, they tear down forests and stuff. What would dragons do? Would a dragon burn down all the forest 200 miles away from its lair just to show its, meaning I live here and don't come and mess with me? Would a red dragon do that? Maybe. I was thinking about that the other day. Like a dragon, if you want to advertise that if you come close to my lair and try to kill me, I will kill you first. So I think a red dragon might simply just burn down everything 10 miles, 15, 20 miles away, meaning don't mess with me, I will kill you kind of message, to just show its raw power, so to speak. And so these are things that I try to figure out and play with, so to speak.
Yeah. It seems like some of it comes from, at least like how you're building like sort of your maps is sort of from asking questions about like, because you have, when you're creating your maps, you have a ton of toys to play with, a bunch of different characters all doing their individual things. And like you were saying with the dragon, like, oh, what would the dragon do to reach this end? I love the fact that a lot of the things that you're doing are very like deliberate. Like there's a reason for the way that things look, whether that is a man-made feature or something that's completely natural. That's very cool to hear, because
Yeah.
you know, like I do like some writing on the side, and it's always fun to sort of play around with who's doing what at which point in time and how everything's, it's sort of like a spider web situation where you're sort of just like mixing everything together.
hmm
Very
And
fun.
I'm so interested in politics too. I have studied political
Yes.
science and stuff at university, and so I love to understand how the real world works, and that was part of my job before, to understand how the real world works. And so that way I want to use that knowledge in a fantasy setting. So okay, so what would a fantasy world works? Meaning, how would political intrigue works? How would economy works and stuff? Meaning, what happens when they have political disputes and trade disputes and stuff like that? And what would happen if you throw interesting things like dragons into a wrench, and if there is a creature of intelligent mollusks living underground that could tear out your brain and invade you that way? How would that affect things like economy, politics, warfare, and all this stuff? And God forbid, cultural things, meaning how would fashion evolve, music tastes and stuff like that in a fantasy world? And that way you can invent cool things in your game. And to me, it's different because I think the rules are secondary to me. It's the world. The rules are a necessary part of the game. Otherwise, it would just be improv, and we would just sit and talk to each other. But to get structure. But for some people, the game is the thing, and the setting and stuff is just a theme for the game. But for me, it's the other way around. The rules are less important, and the environment you play in, and the stories and so on, and the characters and stuff, that is much more interesting than the rules. The rules are a necessary evil, but it took a long time for me to get to that part, but that's where I've evolved over time, so to speak.
That's a great
Oh,
quote. The rules are a necessary evil.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Like, you need that immersion in order to keep your players coming back. If you just have a game of rules
Yeah.
and like you can do
Yeah.
this at this time because of this, it's not giving you anything to really sink your teeth into at the end of the day.
Yeah, but I also think that is a continuum, meaning we have people that looks at this at like they love the Excel spreadsheet and what they come back to gaming, meaning if you can have a +2 sword instead of a +1 sword, your day is made as a gaming day, so to speak. It's for them, the rules are the thing. They play that, and then you need some flavor and stuff. But it's about the math and winning and getting most XP. And then you have the other side. It's all about the poetry and the role play and the emotional thing and the stories and stuff. And most of our game, we are somewhere on this continuum. And since I played for decades, I realized I started out heavy into the rules, and then I going more and more over to the other side, and we go back and forth a little bit, because some of us all of a sudden they come up with new cool rules mechanics, and then I'm a bit more interested in the rules all of a sudden and stuff. So I realized I was starting to get so not disinterested or not interested in my rules. So I realized I need to house rules. So that's one of my projects right now, is to house rule my own version of D&D that I want to use in order to boost my own interest in the rules and force myself to start thinking about it, because I was going on so extreme in the skip the rules kind of idea that I needed to bring my interest back in a bit.
Do you have a favorite map that you've worked on? Or
it must,
or one that's interested you at least the most.
Yeah, there's of course the Greyhawk map that's been my signum. I worked on it for over 20 years, and I think it's 25 years now. 25 years this year on the same map, and over, so to speak, and worked on it. So that is probably that's my lifetime achievement when it comes to mapping. I don't think I will ever do anything that would I plan to update it, so that will stay with me throughout the career. And then I have maps that have been surprisingly fun and interesting, and that's I'm especially thinking of the Earth, the planet where Greyhawk is situated. That was something I avoided for the longest because I don't want to deal with it. I don't want the planet. I was not interested in it. I just saw it as a minefield in the Greyhawk community. We have fought all wars in forums and stuff for decades over what the planet should look like, what it does look like, and what it shouldn't look like, etc. So I was like, I'm not going to go into that bit. But then when I did, it was like it opened up a whole new range of possibilities. So that was something that was so very surprising to me. So I'm starting to really get a huge interest in the planet, so to speak. That was very, very surprising. I really loved it. And now I'm also dipping into city mapping big time. I've avoided that and stayed big. So that's my new kind of love, both planetary maps and especially the Greyhawk, the planet of Greyhawk, so to speak, Earth, and also the city mapping is new areas. But otherwise, also mapping the Midgard setting for Kobold Press have been really, really cool to come at it from the outside and realize what it is to be doing a commission for another publisher, a game setting I never gamed in, and you have to kind of adhere to all the things of doing a commission, meaning you work for a publisher, they tell you what to do and how to do it, not in detail, but what they want, so to speak, and you have to kind of work on a budget, on a time, and stuff. That taught me a lot from project management and stuff, and it was kind of both brutal, fantastic, and awesome in a lot of ways. So yeah.
Are there any parts of the Greyhawk map, because you said like that is a very like all-encompassing project, are there any parts of the map or any stages of that project that were very fun, that stood out in your mind, that you have like an extra soft spot for?
Well, yeah, there are some areas and especially in the eastern part of the map, because I was interested in the area around Greyhawk, Furundi, and those areas where I've gamed, and all of a sudden I realized I have all the old Grey Kingdom and stuff, and to me that was a lot of stuff I barely read anything about, and I was like, okay, I need to get into it. And then that was about 15 years ago when I started getting into it. And then I realized this is a gold mine of cool stuff. And I started to really understand the setting once I did it. And that was something I dreaded. And I was like, oh, I need to do it in order to complete the map. And then I dived deep into it, and it turned out to be awesome. And I ran a campaign set in around the area of Rel Devon for about 10 years or 8-9 years. And with a lot of players, and I think it was like 30 players involved over about a decade, and we ran well over 100 game sessions, and basically almost all day game sessions, and that taught me a wealth. That's when I really started to understand the Greyhawk more in depth, so to speak. I started to become kind of knowledgeable of the setting as a whole, and then that was when I kind of came of age as a Greyhawk mapper, and like 15 years ago when I realized that this is the level of detail you can get to, and it's also when people started helping me. I started to get all sorts of help and support from the Greyhawk community. So that was when this project really took off, and hundreds of people started to use my maps, and now I think it must be thousands that have used my Greyhawk maps now. Yeah.
And at first you were thinking of like, you didn't know if you wanted to get involved with that part of the map, and it ended up and it ended up just being the thing that ended up like exploding it, so to speak.
Yep.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's surprised me over and over again, is that the things that I'm been kind of more dreadful of doing have turned out to be the most fun afterwards. So
you've got the Earth project now too.
Yep. So get into it. The same thing with heraldry. I was like, I'm not sure I'm that good of an artist that can draw things, but thanks to Photoshop Mojo that I've honed over a decade and 15 years or something like that, and modern tools, I realized I can do pretty good heraldry, and I started doing it, and that took off, and people got crazy about it. So that it got a life of its own. Now I'm starting to launch a new project with flags and banners and milestones and other insignia and stuff like that. So that's one project that I'm going to start working on this summer. I've done a couple of little tests. I've only shown one so far, but there's more coming on that one. So I want to show things like, and milestones was one of these things. I realized that we go around meaning old Europe has full of it, and other parts of the world. If you go to where people have lived for hundreds and thousands of years, usually, then you find these little stones that people carved out to tell what road it is and how far it is. Meaning in England, you have them. We have them all over Europe. these milestones, and Americans don't get that because you don't have it here. America is not old enough to have this stuff on a grand scale, and if it is, the roads have probably been widened enough, so they're probably gone out of fashion a long time ago if they were ever here. But in Sweden we have them, and I've seen them in Germany. I've seen them almost every European country and other parts of the world too. And I realized in a fantasy world where you don't have proper maps and stuff, that's what you have. You and it's not only to guide the travelers, it's also people who own the land. It's sending a message. I live here, this is my land, you're now either under my protection or fear me, so to speak. So it's part of that political put down it's ownership, so to speak. You can have competing stones and stuff. So that was something I wanted to do. Meaning, does he mark his borders when he conquers you and stuff like that? So things like that is something I want to put in. Meaning, what does it look like literally when Aius puts down his stakes and claims a city or something? So I wanted to see if I can visualize that a bit.
Oh, you're giving me so many things that I just want to pinch and like keep for like future map making, because I'm totally new to it and it was a mess in all honesty. But yeah, I love that about the milestones.
Yeah.
I'm definitely keeping that in my little toolkit for later.
Yeah,
for sure. So we've touched on this a little bit, but could you explain to me like your process about how you go about your world building in relation to your map making, how you expand on what's already there with this?
Yeah. First, my maps are usually so realistic. I want to visualize it for the DM. There's a whole set of other maps that you want to hand out to your players, for instance, that are mini. If the characters go to big city and they go to a cartographer in the setting, what kind of map can that get from? That's another type of map. So, but that comes later, so to speak. That the handout map, you need in-game prop maps, so to speak. But I'm talking about the map here that is a DM reference that the DM can use in order to prep and in order to show the players what it actually looks like. Like what you have for dungeon maps, but for the whole world, so to speak. That's the tricky bit. And the first bit is to try and read and research an area. So if I'm like, okay, I'm going to map this country or that part of the setting, what I do is that I try to collect as much as possible, and thanks to the internet, it's fairly easy today. A couple of Google searches that will give you a good sense of where to look. And then what I do is that I go to the Greyhawk forums and stuff. Back in the day, I usually post and say, oh, I'm going to map this now. What should I look into, and so on. And people never said anything. It was like barely anyone came out and so on. So in the beginning, I'm going to take all the information. I was studying it for months, and then I was trying to make the best possible little piece of map. And then I put it out there, and people criticized the hell out of it. And I realized, maybe I can turn this into my advantage. So instead of trying to make the best possible map, I scribbled together something and threw stuff in there and then posted that on the Greyhawk forums, and people criticized the hell out of it. Then I took all the criticism and put that into my reading list. And so I turned the worst critics into my helpers. And that is a tip I should. So don't, negative criticism is very, very useful, but don't try. Yeah. Yeah, but don't build a picture. Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say, like, honestly, I love at the end of my sessions doing little like feedback times, because that's the only way you're gonna get better. It's sometimes a little hard to hear at first, but it's the only way you can improve.
Yep. So turn. Meaning, don't try to build the best version possible when you start something. So iterate, so to speak. Make something and then ask for criticism. And the hard part about criticism is to sift out the useful bit and ignore the bits, the ugly bits that you shouldn't listen or read, so to speak. Because as soon as you start sharing things online, you will get positive and negative feedback. It's impossible. And when you got the first hater, someone said, "Oh, someone hates you now. You're famous." So even when that happens, then take that as a plus too. So it's terrible times we live in that, but it's part of how we function as humans. So you have to take the good with the bad, so to speak. That's with the bad.
I'm definitely taking down that quote of like, you've got your first hater, you're famous.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, we got many of them.
Yep. So
Oh,
you're famous. Yep.
yeah.
Woo! Guys, we made it. We
Wow,
made
we
it, guys.
finally
Let's
did
go.
made it. Let's go.
Yes.
Yep.
When you make your maps, have you ever added little secrets that like only you know about? You know, the little Easter eggs that for maybe.
Yeah, to some degree. And in the beginning, it's kind of hard when you do really large area maps, when the resolution is like on my big Greyhawk map, the resolution is like 1 mile per pixel. It's kind of hard to hide anything, but there's a skull, a mountain that looks like a skull from the top down, so to speak, in the Bramblewood forest. That was one thing and it was kind of funny. It just ended up like that in the fractals that I was using in Bryce at a time. So, and that's the weird thing. If you use I use a lot of tools that randomly generate stuff like fractals and stuff and erosion and things. So that means that if you keep generating, and sooner or later a pyramid is going to pop up, or something that looks like a face or a skull or something. So that's when I saw these images from Mars, when they say, oh, there's like there is a person staring at you on the planet Mars, or there's something that looks like a building or something. I realized that happens, meaning the tools I'm using that is just producing random noise that I'm just dialing up and down different parameters on, produce stuff like that. So the real world, the same thing. Sooner or later, something square, round, octagonal, or whatever will pop up, and they will be rare, and that means that they will be seen as something that looks like something that humans created or some intelligent species created if you see it from space or from the air. So I'm not surprised that coming, but and then I put in and that's one of the things. I was so wary of actually putting my own campaign content on the published version of my Greyhawk map. So I weeded out that, only put things in that were either in published sources or that others have created. So I was kind of wary of putting my own stuff there, but a few places I put in there, and sometimes it taken 20 years for someone to find it, and I got like, oh, where's this place? And I said, oh, I put it in there, little places that are mine places, because I tried to, beginning, I was so wary of putting my own stuff in there. So I just tried to put other people's things there. But now I'm a little bit more keen on putting my own stuff there gradually, as people get to ask about it and stuff. So sometimes it's taken 20 years for someone to find that little place that I put in there, and I forgot that I put it in there. And people say, where did that come from? And it was like, I'm not sure where it comes from. And I do my sources and search my sources, and I realized that I put it there 20 years ago or something. So yeah. So that have happened.
Yeah, you have to keep track of those things. Yeah, I'm gonna have a look for this skull now. I really want to find it.
It might be under some name or something, but it's up in the Bramblewood forest somewhere up there. That was a little skull thing that I made a Facebook post or something about it like 10 years ago or something when it happened. So there are some places. But on the other, when you move in, the more detailed the scale, the more interesting it is. I did one of my first Patreon project was a crater. It was a tech demo of have something that was really deep. So there was 20 kilometers from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the crater, and a large area, to see if I could stack height maps on top of each other. I put a dragon skeleton out in the desert in a place there. So and a couple of other footprints and stuff like that are going around, and so there's some little Easter eggs here and there. So and that will be fun. The more detailed maps, the more cool stuff like that you can put in.
So going on with the maps, what is the biggest map you have ever made?
So far, it is the Midgard map. If you put together everything I've done for Midgard, is still the biggest map. So and people don't realize it, especially the Greyhawkers don't realize I've actually mapped more area in more detail in Midgard. So if I put together my Midgard maps, they are over 80,000 pixels. I think it's like 88,000 pixels across, if I put them all together, so to speak. And the thing is that part of it has never been published. So I handed it over, I got paid, but it's not been published yet. So there are a big chunk of that map that is still sitting in the Kobold Press vaults. So we'll see if they ever publish it or not. We'll see. So that is the biggest map. But on the other hand, I'm starting to when it comes to pixels now, my Shieldlands project is catching up. It's up to 64,000 pixels across, and next year I will probably make, so that will be the most detail. And the Altamira project that I'm doing together with Jay Scott, Lord Gazumba for Troll Games, it's soon going to rival it in size, so to speak. So those are our projects that are coming up, and I haven't officially announced it yet, but next year my plan is to launch a City of Greyhawk project. I hope that I can officially launch it next year, and it's the 50th year anniversary of D&D and stuff. So I thought it would be appropriate to launch. And Wizard of the Coast are working something on the City of Greyhawk. My guess, I don't know anything, but my guess is that they are going to have some sort of honorary project involving the City of Greyhawk. So I thought it would be cool to announce it. It will probably be a 2-year project or something to map it. That's why I've done a lot of city mapping lately. So now I know I can pull it off technically, so to speak. And that will be a project that will probably be somewhere. I want to make the city, like a 10 by 10 foot poster or something like that you can put on the wall in full 3D and stuff. So that is something that I want to dig into, because now I know how to do it technically, and I also collecting all the data, and I know people that know about Greyhawk enough that I can probably pull up something really cool. So that is something.
You've got a lot of projects. Like
I have projects for the next
couple of years, especially.
I have the next decade basically dialed in, so to speak. So yeah.
I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
Oh, what were you saying, sir?
I'm 58 years now. If I'm lucky, I have another 20 years. I can do this. So I need to realize that my time is limited. I can't work on this forever. I will be too old and become dementia and whatever, or something like that. But if I'm lucky, I work on this for another 20 years. If I'm really lucky, maybe 25. So that means that I have to start thinking, what do I want to do before the end, so to speak. So that means that I want to do the Greyhawk project. I want to do the Greyhawk map all over again, and I want to do the planetary map. And I want to make sure that some of the iconic areas of Greyhawk are covered. Those are the things I really want to do. And so I want to, and each of them is probably a 5-year project at least. So and some of them can be used, data from one can be used into another, so to speak. And then I want to do more Greyhawk heraldry and a few other things. But those are my main topics and things that I want to give away to the Greyhawk community, so others can take and continue what I've done, so to speak, because that's the other big part of this. I don't want it to just be pretty pictures. I want all the raw data, all the Photoshop files and all the raw data to be available, so others can take this and do their own version or continue the work, because there will be way better technology in 10-15 years or something that I might not be able to learn or have the money to buy the hardware for, or whatever, or the manpower. So someone can take all my data and continue the work later on. That will be so awesome, so to speak. So
you're already leaving like such a legacy already with what you've done. And it's just so exciting to see that you were still pushing for more, still pushing to like do Greyhawk in particular justice, and give the fans who loved it all these years just even more detail, even more kind of things to look at and to include and sink their teeth into for their own games.
Yeah, and there's also great responsibility with this, because I don't want to. Yeah, because it's easy when you do a map like the big setting map. You can just put things in there that are already written or mentioned or named. But once you get into the weeds, meaning if I want to make something that have the resolution of like now I'm doing what I call the porta potty scale, 1 pixel is 5 feet. Then all of a sudden you can put individual buildings and trees and roads and stuff, and that means that. Then it's up to me. Should I put like a castle there, or is there a road here? Meaning I need to fill in things that aren't mentioned in lore, and I just have to infer or come up with stuff myself. And that's why I'm making sure that I put them on a separate layer, so people can take my raw file and simply strip off all the roads and all the buildings and stuff and make their own version. So I'm not trying to impose and say, oh, this is what I think Greyhawk looks like. I think this is my version of it, and then people can take what I've done and make their own version. That I think is important too, because then that comes responsibility, and I realize that now. But I can make my own version for my own games. That's one thing. But there should be kind of a public version or a version for everybody with less of my stuff in there and more like, if you take all the sources, this is what you get. But I still have to fill in the white spots, so to speak. So it comes responsibility with it. So it's not just something and that's the thing that I tell to every creators. Once you get into it and people start using it, then responsibility comes whether you want it or not. So yeah.
And kind of bringing it back to that, I love how open you are with your resources. So like bringing it back to you talking about your raw data, releasing things under the Creative Commons, you seem to, with your work, you seem to put a large emphasis on redistributing these resources and these, creative projects to the greater community. Because I think that some people might be tempted to not do those kinds of things. They would want to sort of keep it within their wheelhouse, so to speak, maybe not spread it around as much, right? To sort of, I don't know, lock their content down, so to speak. But you seem to have a very strong emphasis on the fact that you are a part of this community and you want to see this community grow and get stronger and be able to use the things that you have created to build something even greater from it. What are your kind of thoughts?
Yeah, it's there's I think three main reasons for this. One is that I'm operating under the auspices of Wizard of the Coast. They own Greyhawk, so to speak. So it's their baby legally and financially and all that, so to speak. So I have to work within the restrictions that gives me. So meaning I can't sell my work on Greyhawk. But I've actually come in this day and age that is not much of a hindrance, thanks to Wizard. And no, I'm not the one praising Wizard of the Coast. I've stopped buying their products or whatever because I think their business acumen lately have been abysmal at best, so to speak. But that's a whole other issue. So yeah. In that sense, I don't want to I don't buy their products anymore. I have all the stuff that I need, so to speak. So in that sense, I'm good. But the reason they are doing something good is that they have the fan creation policy. And the weird thing is we should probably not talk too much about it because then they might revoke it. But we'll see. That gives us the rights to release fan creation content as long as we give it away for free. We can do derivative work set in their using their IP if you give it away for free, so to speak, within reasonable limits, so to speak. And you can go to Wizard of the Coast website and download and look at the fan creation policy or the rules. I forgot which word they use, but and they are actually fairly open, so to speak. So that's good. That's one reason. The other reason is that I want my maps and stuff to be used in the Greyhawk community, and there's also a selfish reason in this day and age where things. Meaning there's a wealth of stuff, meaning there are millions of things coming out for D&D and tabletop role-playing games. Whatever you want to do, there's 100 options. If you want an adventure, a source book, a rule variant, whatever, a portrait, there's hundreds, if not thousands of things. So either you sit and hoard it yourself, and then you need an enormous ad budget in order to tell others that your stuff is out there and come and buy it, or you give it away for free, and that is advertising itself. And I realize it's much smarter. So when people are so-called stealing my stuff and spreading it, they are doing me a service. So I've turned today's kind of internet economy or in things where people use it and share it and stuff, because that gives back to me. And then I simply tell people, if you want me to continue to work on this and do more, then you can donate a little bit of money to me and I can sit and do it. And once you reach a certain stuff, that means I don't have to police my content at all. I can just put it on my website and that my fans paid for, and people can just download and use it. And that way, the urge for people to use and spread and tweak whatever becomes beneficial for me. And I think a lot of people and publishers can use that way more than they do. The drawback with it is that in order for this to work, I need to stay away from physical stuff. That meaning I don't print my maps and stuff, because that will take away the whole economy, so to speak. So as long as people can download it and use it. But I should say there is now Noble Dwarf. He's putting together a set of merch and stuff with my heraldry and maps and stuff on it that you can purchase there. That most of the stuff don't earn anything, because that will go against the fan creation policy. So it will simply be he get paid whatever it costs to print it, and that means that the costs go down. But I will sell some t-shirts and mugs and stuff with my logo on it that will actually give me some money as a way of donating to my project, so to speak. So there will be a way around it. He's not ready to launch yet, but very soon. So I've seen some cool stuff. So it's coming. Yeah.
So keep an eye out.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about a lot of the projects that you have done and all the projects that you have upcoming. And I think that segues very nice into the next question.
Going with the content creation, the projects or anything, have you experienced anything like burnout or lack of ideas? And if you have, like, how did you combat these? Like, how did you go from, at this point, I've got lack of motivation. What can I do to achieve what I want to do with this?
That is a great question, and I think it's an I, to be honest, I get burnout once a week. So I get burnout often. I feel like it's terrible. I sit here by myself. No one cares what I'm doing. It's not changing the world to anything better, and whatever. And I'm just sitting here. No one understands what I'm doing. My husband doesn't understand. My mother doesn't understand. My neighbors, they ask me, what the heck you're doing? I say, I'm mapping worlds that don't exist. And people stare at me like, what kind of idiot are you to doing that? So in the normal world where I live, people don't understand or care one bit what I'm doing. That can be kind of depressing at times. And then when you don't have a regular good income, so to speak, and you have to live relatively poor. But on the other hand, I also get to work with my hobby, and I get to live in one of the best parts of the world. And I used to have a career so I'm not poor by absolute standards at all, so to speak. But I make about the same amount of money as minimum wage. So if I flipped burgers or worked for Amazon delivering stuff or something, I'm in that bottom range, so to speak. It's good enough to pay my bills and then some. But on the other hand, I get to work with fun stuff, and I get to do whatever I want to do as long as people like it. So there are a lot of pluses, and for me, the tactic is to try and arrange my life so I want to work, and also don't work yourself into the bottom of the barrel until you hit the wall, and then you have to take a month or 6 months. I've seen a lot of creatives, they work day and night on a project to finish it, and then they're so burned out that they need a year to come back and hate it. So when I get a burnout, I usually work in spurts for 2 or 3 days. I can work hard, and then I take a day off. At least one day a week, I'm completely away from the computer. I go away, I go out hiking, I just listen to music, I sit in a patio and just dream myself away. So to have a lifestyle that you want to work, that I think is key when you're creative. And also stop counting hours. When you have a creative work, it's not how many hours or how hard you try, is if you're able to do something. So work when you feel like you're able to. If you wake up 2 o'clock in the morning and it's like, I have a great idea, I want to do it, then work 3 hours and then just go to bed, so to speak. So treat yourself favorably, so to speak. That it's hard to do, but you can, and I'm good at it at times, and I'm bad at it at times, so to speak. And then also make sure you have other things to do. So don't try to make your creative endeavors the only thing you do. Meaning, I'm active in politics, I do hiking, I have friends, I read a lot, and stuff that has nothing to do with my creative side. And it's kind of weird because I've taken my hobby to my job. That means that I have to take my old job and make it into hobbies. So in that way, I've turned my world upside down. And I think that's really important, to go out there and engage with real world problems and stuff. It's wonderful for inspiration, but it also teaches me how the real world works. And that is also really good to put into the creative process of fantasy worlds. So that's something I can tell everybody. Study the real world, understand it, learn things like economy, history, science, and stuff like that, and then use that in your fantasy creations. Don't think that not only read fantasy, read and understand the real world, and then try to figure out how dragons work and demons and fae and elves and whatnot. Meaning, how would, if you live 1,000 years, how would that affect civilization, thinking, architecture, and stuff like that? How would that affect politics? Who would the elves choose to rule them, and how would they rule if they lived for 1,500, 2,000 years? How would that affect? Meaning, some people think that the world is too conservative when we have politicians who are 80 years old. Imagine if you have politicians that are 800 years, or even worse, you have undead ones. What if liches can run the world? How would that affect you, and what kind of resistance movement would there start? That's a great campaign arc just there, so to speak. So to understand the real world and then think about it in a fantasy setting, that's to me is the recipe to stop burnout, so to speak, or want to come back to it again.
Oh, definitely. That's such good advice as well. It's like the more you dig deeper into what's there, the more you ask questions. It's just the story writes itself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Great.
Just kind of gotta get out of the way, let it run its course until it's done.
Yep. And choose to come back up again, so to speak. Don't be afraid of stopping. Don't sit there and pound your head against the monitor or whatever. Go away, do something else, and then come back again. Work when you want to work. So the key is to try to have a life so you want to work. That's the key bit, so to speak. So yeah.
Now, dragons, right? They have their hoards of gold. In my mind, you have your own hoard of experience. And I am always fascinated by what can sort of be gleaned from that with people with stuff that they have spent, a large portion of their life working. And something that I was curious about is the technological side of what you do. Because when you started, it was basically hand-drawn pencil sketches, and then over time your process has more than likely evolved in a lot of ways. So I wanted to ask, what technology now are you using like frequently to get what you need done? What are some of the things that have made the process easier? Have there ever been any moments where there'd be a stage of the map making process that would typically take a while and be extremely monotonous, but nowadays there's tools to really consolidate that and make it more snappy? What is that?
Oh yeah, for me that was actually why I got into it big time, was that I originally saw these digitally created maps back in the 80s that were done on using supercomputers and satellite images and LiDAR, radar and stuff like that. They put together data from the real world and then visualized using computers. And you have to remember, computers then barely had colors on this is before the internet or anything like that. It's the first I saw was late 70s, early 80s, where you could start depicting, imaging the world using computers. And I realized I want that for my games. And I realized the computers were evolving fast then as they are today. And I was like, if 10 years you can do things that look like a picture. And I was like, I want to do that. This is so cool. I want that for my games. And I never thought it was going to happen. I was like, I was hoping it's going to happen. So when I saw an ad in a computer magazine for a program called Bryce back in 93, 90 or early 90s, and that it ran on Macs and you could do digital terrain in it, I was like, oh, this is so cool. So I kind of called, there was one store in Stockholm that sold Macs in 93 or something like that. And I was like, oh yeah, you knew. And I was like, oh, I need this Mac. And it was like, oh, it's the equivalent of $5,000. And I was like, maybe I should go and buy it. And it was like, oh, and so, but thankfully I didn't. I actually I called, I think. First I sent a letter and I can't wait for 2 weeks to get the mail back. So I find the phone number to the company somewhere in California, Oregon, or Washington State. I'm not really sure. It was somewhere on the US West Coast. And I managed to call them and ask, like, oh, this software and stuff, I only have a Windows computer. I said, no, don't go and run and buy a Mac. We're working on a Windows version. It's coming out in like a year or something like that. So I was like waiting a whole year, and then I bought the most beefy Windows machine you could ever purchase. It cost almost $5,000, but I could still use my old software. So I bought the best possible computer. I got the software and I started using it, and it was so hard. I didn't understand any of it. It looked like crap. But about few months later, I got something. This looks good, and it was like, yes, it was good enough. That was how I got started with my Greyhawk maps. And in the beginning, it was so limited. I had to hand draw rivers and stuff. And then it took about 15 years ago, I found the next evolution in tools. That was World Machine. It was a tool that could do real virtual terrain with rivers and a whole bunch of stuff. And it was like, then it was the same thing all over again. I had to buy the beefiest computer every year. I've always done it, and I started using World Machine. That was a whole new thing, because now I had to do 3D programming and visual programming. That took me 5 years to teach myself that. And then I now, after being using World Machine and other tools like Gaia for 15 years, I'm starting to be professional level at using them. Now I can create almost anything I want in them, and there's still limitations and stuff, but I'm now talking to the developers and asking for things and going back and forth and get early releases and stuff. So it's kind of interesting. Now I'm using the same tools as they're using in Hollywood studios or academia when they want to map different planets and stuff. I use the same tools and I bought now for about $7,000, $5,000 plus a graphics card was my latest computer I bought like 6 months ago, in order to stay on top. So it's very computing heavy. You need the best tools money can buy, and even more. So every few years I buy a new computer that is usually about $5,000-$6,000. And I just kept doing it. So now I have a 24 core beast with 128 gigabytes of RAM, and I want more. I want even more. So now I'm looking and seeing whether specs can give me a terabyte of RAM and stuff like that. So, but soon I will probably be able to get a computer in the cloud somewhere that will be cheaper than to have so maybe one more desktop, and then it will be a cloud computer somewhere that I can do. But the tools are getting way better faster. So in a few years, AI that is both hailed or people are terrified of it and so on, but that technology is already coming big into this field. So in 10 years' time, no one needs me in order to do the maps. So my wisdom in how to visualize is probably going to be more useful than my actual technical skills, because AI will be able to do a heck of a lot of what I do very, very quickly. Any DM can who has the vision, so to speak. So for me, vision will be where I can probably have the biggest impact in a decade or so. But it will probably take about a decade for technology. But it might be 2 years. You never know. It's going so fast right now that AI and a bunch of other technologies. So I see it both as terrifying, but also very promising. And it's hopefully going to be somewhere in between. So it's kind of interesting, but especially in the creative front, it's now you can do so many cool things with it, and especially when it comes to render and visualization, computers can now produce things. I've been to SIGGRAPH, the big computer graphics thing, several times, and the stuff I've seen there a couple of years ago, the latest cutting edge it's mind-bogglingly cool, so to speak. And I'm using VR and stuff for my flight sim and stuff, and now we can do things on a scale that was not possible. So you can probably see a fantasy game that is a whole planet. And I think that the vision that the tabletop role-playing game publishers have is not meaning they can envision way bigger things than their vision seems to be still just doing virtual tabletops the old-fashioned way and selling books, and that's cool. But there is a possibility, and someone is going to do it. So the next version of Skyrim or something in 5-10 years, and when you put AI into NPCs and stuff, so I think we can have a new golden age of role-playing game in completely new ways that we can barely imagine yet. And so I'm very much an optimist when it comes to that part. We will have cool tools that are way better than we've ever envisioned, so to speak. So and also that the tools will be so easy to use. So a lot of creators at home, so to speak, any DM in the future can use these tools to create whatever game world they want, and content, and illustrate it and visualize it and tweaks and tease the gamers and their players with the most awesome content. That is, it's becoming a reality fast. And that is coming. So soon it will be, what kind of vision and creativity do you have? The tools to create it, the computers can create it for you, but you have to come up with the ideas. And that's where I think that that systematic creative thinking is where I think a lot of, if you want to be a creator now, don't sit and learn one tool and draw lines more efficient. Start having visions. What do you want to create? And technology will be there for you to create whatever you want to create. And so start thinking in those terms. Don't learn at one technical skill and think that they will. No, you need to learn a new technical skill every 5 years and reinvent yourself. But to have a vision of something cool you want to create, that can be more long term, so to speak.
That's actually, so also just to confirm, it is confirmed that Anna is a mind reader, because that was actually the next question that we were going to ask, was about AI and how you see things going with that. Because the typical response that I think a lot of people would hear about the concept of AI art and being able to generate things like that, near instantaneously in some cases, is that it is like, I have not heard many optimistic takes on that, because a lot of people are afraid that this is going to greatly harm artistic communities, as people aren't able to get maybe as many commissions, as people will just turn to AI to use art.
Yep.
But I do find that to be a very interesting outlook on it, on less so focusing on the technical skills, on you say, and more so focusing on your vision for what you can create, that you are, thinking that AI might get to the point where, like you said, in maybe a couple of years, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, are able to produce like photorealistic maps, but it's still going to be a human that's kind of creating it from the background with their vision.
Yeah, because and this is scary, but I try to, and I want to be the glass is half full rather than the glass is half empty kind of person, so to speak. And we just have to look at it. Meaning humans, we've been around, we've had a culture for about 100,000 years, and we met some heavy, steep difficulties in the way of various kinds over the 100,000, and we survived this far. I don't think AI will be the one that will. It will be a lot of disruption. And it will definitely be devastating for a lot of communities. Not only art, there will be a lot of stuff. If your job is to sit filling things in Excel spreadsheets, I'm sorry, but computers will probably do that job very quickly. My job, I give it 10 years at the longest. Then people can do what I do, all the technical stuff that I do, and all the hours I put into it. Any DM who wants to do in 10 years can have that done in without having any of the technical knowledge. That's my prediction. So I will be out of a job too. So I'm not saying that, I love AI because I can do it, then screw everybody else. No, my income is on the line here too, just like everybody else. But I'm also very hopeful in that sense. But the scary bit is that it will be very, very disruptive. A lot of people will lose their jobs, and a lot of people have to learn other things to do or move somewhere else in order to do something else. But but we can look at a lot of other technology. But I'm not going to go deep into economy or politics. But I think we need to reshape society in order to facilitate this, just like we had to do in during the Industrial Revolution and stuff like that. That's messy and politically fraught with danger and a whole bunch of stuff. And the first dangers we already seen, meaning remember Cambridge Analytica in 2016 US election and stuff? That was the first time AI screwed up something in the real world. And that's already happened, meaning that's 10 years ago when AI started having its hand on things. So we're not something that will happen in the future. We're halfway into it already. But when it comes to role-playing games and stuff, I see that especially in creative areas like this, I see it as some of the coolest creative tools ever, because it will be, in some ways, it will be a great equalizer. Whether you spend 5,000 hours learning how to draw using a pencil or Photoshop, meaning if you have a vision to create something, the tool would just create it for you, and you can keep using the tool until, oh, that's my warrior or my hero or my city or my dragon or whatever it is, so to speak, or text and stuff. So it is scary, but it's also very promising. So when it comes to the creative side, meaning that's the good thing with tabletop role-playing, it's make-believe. This is not real stuff, meaning we're not putting real facts or anything. Meaning if you want to come up with your own new campaign for a story arc, ChatGPT is your friend, meaning if it screws up, meaning you want to have some stuff. So in that sense, it's awesome, but it's devastating for a lot of people that live on using it. But early on now, I think the good thing is that it leverage everybody, it makes everybody better, so to speak. So people who, if you know visual art and stuff, and if you have a Photoshop with built-in AI art, that means that if you're good at Photoshop, now you're even better. Someone who is not good at using the tools or understand imaging and graphic design, they will only get twice as good, but you will get twice as good as well. So it boosts everybody. But down the line, it's going to get so good that most of us will or other stuff will come out that is so good. And one example, I never thought true creativity could come from a computer program until I saw on Midjourney someone put in Chewbacca as a Celtic rope knot. And the picture that came out of that was the cutest Chewbacca I've ever seen. It was an awesome image. And I realized that, damn, that's not that many artists on earth that could have come up with that thing. And I realized that stuff that I've seen AI do are so truly creative that if a person have done it, we would have hailed that person as fantastic. And I've seen that in my own field. I put in things for symbols, whatever, and I got some stuff out of AI that is simply amazing. But on the other hand, a lot of the source material, meaning the thing that we learned, the AI originally learned from, is things that have been harvested on the internet. Meaning my stuff has been there teaching AIs how to do what I do, and that will replace me. But on the other hand, that is only initially, meaning AI today learn not from that source material. It learns from you telling it what you like or not. That's why a lot of AI art looks like the best artists in the world, because the best artists in the world, they do what they like and what their customers and fans like. AI is the same way. If you have 1 million people telling AI what looks good or not, AI doesn't need to know what something looks like originally. That 1 million of users will tell AI in an afternoon what it needs to do, so to speak, to do it. So we already passed that when AI needs the raw data to learn. Now it interacts with us on a daily basis en masse. So that train is already gone. So now you can, meaning the Photoshop AI, it's not learned from that way. It learns from the interaction with millions of Photoshop users. And it gets better every day, every hour. And that means that it learned, just take AI art. It didn't understand what a dragon was 6 months ago. Now it can make dragons that are as cool as any I've seen being illustrated. I mean, it knows the whole monster manual now. I mean, you can tell it whatever monster you want, and AI, that's the thing, because we have so many role players and creators now telling it what elves and dwarves and halflings and beholders or whatever it is. It knows all of these monsters now. It had no clue to begin with. Now it knows all of this because the users tells it, oh, I don't like that, I like that. And everything gets weighed in the algorithms. So the whole industry is changing. But I think we need to start looking at how to organize society in order to facilitate that. It's coming out of the bag. It's not going to come back in again.
Yeah, and that I think that's a good like summary sort of statement with it, is that this industry and a ton of other industries are going to change because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And with change is always going to be some strong positives and some strong negatives, right?
Yep.
And it's not necessarily a question of if this is going to happen. It's a question of, well, it's actually a statement of it's here now.
Yeah.
And when are these other things going to happen later down the line?
Yeah. I'll see way more worse in politics and stuff, meaning the whole, and it will change what the internet is, meaning all of a sudden we will have meaning everybody's worried about all the crappy meme content and conspiracy theories. Imagine when AI can spew out believable stuff like that en masse for no cost whatsoever. We need to be smarter as societies and as human beings and stop believing crap everywhere, so to speak. But on the other hand, be a creative fantasy player and do play make-believe, so to speak, in order to realize what's true or not, so to speak. That's hard. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Now, kind of bringing this back to something that you said earlier. So you said that the technology that you're working with is stuff that people are using on like the Hollywood level. You are using very professional, in-depth software. And so this is kind of more of a fun question. Are there any things that you often find yourself critiquing about other people's maps that you might see in media, like movies, TV shows, or any form of media in general? Because I know that when a person has a lot of experience in a particular skill set, they'll sometimes look at other people performing in that skill set, and they have a different sort of vision on it, a different sort of takeaway from it, a different way of viewing it. And so there might be a couple of things that they might find themselves critiquing about it, or maybe some things that even irk them commonly, that they'll see maybe new people within the skill trying to get in. So is there anything?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's one thing when it comes, especially when it comes to fantasy maps, rivers. That's the most interesting thing. And at first I was like, I had a hunch when I see rivers are weird because they small rivers, and now we're talking about the real world, so to speak, that small rivers branch together, form bigger rivers, and then they flow out to the ocean. There are a few exceptions to this, like the River Jordan that goes from a small lake into a bigger lake and then it evaporates away. And the Okavango River flows out in the desert and then just evaporates. So there are a few exceptions to it, but otherwise almost everywhere that happens, so to speak. And in a fantasy world, if you look at almost all fantasy maps, very few rivers flow north. A lot of rivers, sometimes one river goes separate ways and goes out in the ocean in two different directions. For instance, you have lakes that drains into two rivers. That only happens temporarily. As soon as the lake is low enough the lake will simply drain until it hit its lowest point, where the lowest river have the estuary or the inlet, and that will be it, so to speak. So lakes will only have one natural outlet after a while, so to speak. So that is so rivers is the thing. But it struck me that most rivers go south. There's hardly any rivers that go north. And I realized that my theory on this, and I haven't scientifically proven it, but my theory is that when people sit with the paper in front of them and draw, it's more natural for them rivers to flow down paper rather than up paper, so to speak. So it seems to be, and that's one of the first things. If I see someone done a map of a fantasy continent, or a big island or a world, I always look at the rivers. Do rivers flow in almost every direction? Because that's what they naturally should do on most worlds. If fantasy worlds will be like the real world, there will be either be a planet or something, but gravity will be be spread equally, so to speak, then rivers will probably flow in every direction. But almost in Greyhawk, there is only one river that a little bit of its run goes north. Almost all our rivers go south or east or west, but not north. And that seems to be the case on almost all fantasy worlds. And my thinking is that someone finds it more natural to draw rivers in these directions rather than north.
I'm never gonna be able to look at rivers in a map again.
Yeah,
I'm gonna want to find something and look at it now just to see if that. Oh my gosh, I love those little tidbit things.
Yeah, that's one of the things, and it took me 20 years of doing this before I started to realize it. That damn, it's the case. It's not only Greyhawk; other maps have the same problem. So I realized that's actually a feature, and now I think it's kind of funny in a way, but it's part of human nature, so to speak. So I try to overcome these in my own work now, and since I'm using algorithms and fractals and stuff doing it, then rivers tend to flow in every direction from it. So, but the problem is that when you work on sources from like written texts and stuff, then that creeps back in, and it is kind of funny. But I tried in Greyhawk to add more rivers flowing naturally that way, and examples in Greyhawk and stuff. A lot of fantasy worlds are created. You start with a small area, and then you organically add terrain as you play. So a lot of fantasy worlds are not created so someone thinks of the whole thing. You just play and add a little bit, and all of a sudden, now I've gone far enough, we make a coast here. So there are several rivers in Greyhawk that start 50 miles away from the coast, and then they flow 3,000 miles across the whole continent out in the ocean in the other end. That will barely happen in the real world, so to speak. There are some exceptions in like South America, for instance. The Brazilian coast have very few rivers south. They flow inland and around, so to speak, because you have coastal mountains. So there are a few exceptions, but that seems to be the norm in Greyhawk. There, almost all rivers start close to the coast up north, and then they flow south for a long time. So yeah.
Gotcha.
So
That's
those
cool.
are weird observations. Yeah. When you've been doing this too long, you start seeing things like that.
You start seeing things.
Yep.
The maps start talking to you. They whisper their secrets.
Yep.
Hello. So, doing what you do, if someone was to say, take a step in your walk in your shoes, for example, is there any advice you would give them and how to get into stuff that you do? Like, how would they go about it?
That's a great question, and now there are more possibilities to get into be a creative and turn it into your career and work, so to speak. And my thing, first, go out and learn something. Find your passion. That's step one. What do you want to do, so to speak? What do you really? I want to be a really, really good writer or illustrator, or I want to rules mechanic. Something that you really, that's my passion, so to speak. And then try to learn that really, really deep. That's step one, so to speak. Step two is that then you need to understand how that interacts with the rest of the world. Meaning a lot of people, I know how to write these things, and then they publish these things, but they don't understand. You need to understand how that fit into the greater big, so to speak. Meaning when I do maps, I need to understand how do gaming works. How can you use my maps? How other people using maps? So I know what I do can fit in with the whole scheme of things, so to speak. That's really important too. So first become an expert, and then become a generalist. And then after that comes the trickiest bit, and that is to be persistent over time and listen to criticism and take it in a way without succumbing to it, so to speak. Those are the three steps, so to speak, and have fun doing it. And also realize that a creative career is fun, but it's a lousy career. So always try to do something else. Build your life on something else to begin with. I think a lot of us really successful in the tabletop role-playing game sphere, in that we have had other careers and jobs before, and then when you get into your 30s or 40s or something like that, when you already have done some, you earn some money, and you have a little bit of security and safe, that's when you can plunge on this full time, so to speak. But the world is changing, so there is now there is way more possibilities in this area, and meaning just look at Critical Role. I mean, there are a few careers where you can earn that kind of money. So there, but it looks a bit like sports. And the tabletop role-playing game and the creative scene is very much like sports. Most people have to pay to participate. And then there's a few stars at the top that earns enormous amount of money. And I'm one of these few people. I'm not at the top, but I'm 3/4 or something at the top, so to speak. I'm the one that can scrape by, so to speak. I'm on the B team or the C team, so to speak. And most players and stuff are down at the bottom, and they have to pay to participate. And then you start earning a little bit of monies. And most creative industries where there is art, where you're writing books or whatever, making video games or whatever, most people have to pay to participate, and a few people at the top earn enormous amount of money. And then there's a little bit of a middle class there, so to speak. And you need to understand that that's the odds, so to speak. So the odds of going rich on YouTube or Twitch or something are minuscule, but they are there. But there's a huge uphill. But on the other hand, there's a lot of fun to only having it as a part-time career or as a hobby that pays for itself and then some. And because it gives you other riches in life apart from a big career. It gives you wonderful friends, a creative outlet, and a lot of fun things to do, so to speak. So even if you will not buy you a house or stuff like that, so get into it, and 20 years later you might be able to pay your bills and stuff doing it, but it usually takes a decade or two to be really established, so to speak, and to work on it. So don't go into it and work steady and learn and be passionate about it and have fun doing it, and eventually you can do it full time. That might very well be.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for today's Campfire episode. Anna, thank you so much for this talk. We've had an amazing time. Again, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to have you here. We have a few moments if you want to shout anything, any products or anything that you're working on, feel free.
Okay, I'm working on currently. I'm working on Altamira. It's a project that Jay Scott and me, Lord Xuma, we're doing for Troll Lord Games. That will be, we don't know when Kickstarter stuff will be launched because there's Troll Lord has been so successful and stuff, so we had to adjust timelines a little bit. So that is coming. I have I'm putting together a new generation of Greyhawk maps. I'm taking my content and making it in using GIS and stuff. So that's coming. More heraldry and a bunch of other stuff is coming to my, and it will be, so keep a lookout on my website, annabmeyer.com, or go to patreon.com/AnnaBMeyer. And there you can find some more stuff, and almost all of the content is created or released under Creative Commons. All my Greyhawk content is released under Creative Commons. So you can download it, you can use it, you can make your own version, you can share it and stuff. So but Patrons get a chance to get stuff early. They can get some of the raw materials, and they are the ones that can tell me what to do and what not to do, so to speak. So yeah.
Link in description if you want to go check out Anna. Guys, thank you so much again. We really appreciate you all your love and support, and we'll see you later, adventurers. Bye.
Bye.